Welcome to everyone. We're grateful to have Gavin Chanin with us to talk to us about the 2019 vintage, which we're about to release. So straight over to you, Gavin. Please tell us how the vintage was for you, the challenges, and your estimation of quality.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. 2019 was one of my favorite all-time vintages, and I think the wines reflect that. We had a typical growing season in Santa Barbara, so cool, consistent, but extremely sunny weather. That's kind of what Santa Barbara specializes in. The growing season was roughly, obviously it depends on vineyard, but it was roughly 131 days, which for a reference point is about 31 days longer than a typical Pinot region. And that's because of our coastal climate, and that's what gives us that sunshine. The key component of 2019 for me that I kind of hang on to is we had a really harsh cold snap in August. And why I like that is it really forces the vines and sends a message to the vines to focus on ripening and stop growing wood, stop growing leaves. So in vintages where we see that, and I always refer to 2010, but another great Santa Barbara vintage that's very similar is 2001, which was arguably one of my favorite Santa Barbara vintages ever. And 1998 was very similar. And basically what that gave us is just this extremely mature, perfectly balanced fruit at reasonable sugar levels. So I think the wines are incredibly balanced, incredibly elegant. And then as Pinot and Chardonnay can sometimes do, be elegant and concentrated at the same time. I expect the wines to age for a very long period of time. And they taste delicious now. So I couldn't be happier and excited to get them out to you. Yields are, and your customers will notice this with the allocations, yields were also very small, which contributes to that balance, that age-worthiness, and that quality as well. But unfortunately, it hurts quantity.
And what were the factors that caused those smaller yields in 19?
For us, it's mostly tumultuous weather during the flowering portion of the growing season. So that's kind of when we tend to occasionally have extreme wind, which is also similar to 2010 and 2011. Now, the benefit of that, if there is a benefit to having extremely low yields, is that you're growing that small amount of fruit from day one. You're not saying, hey, we're going through 92% of the ripening season. We're then going to drop fruit and expect the remaining fruit to become magically better. There's something special about having low yields from a very, very early period and then having a cool season to go with it, with that California sunshine. So that's kind of that balancing act of those vintages that I mentioned, those previous vintages where we just have kind of a combination of factors that come together to make what I think are really great wines.
And where you are, thankfully for you, you have less of a worry with fires, but for the whole of California, rainfall is a very serious question. 19 started with a drink, with some water?
Yeah, we got a lot of rain in the beginning and then nothing else. Santa Barbara is technically a Mediterranean climate. So we have moderate winters and then cold, cool, I would say, spring, summers, and falls. So one of our challenges is actually getting enough frost during the winter. Vine irrigation is almost entirely common in all of the Central Coast and all of California for that part. But we predominantly work with old vines, and the old vines at Sanford and Benedict and Los Alamos in particular have been through enough of this that they need very little water. So that's one of the things I argue about old vines being so important is during heat spells, cold spells, anything kind of out of the usual, those old vines really hold it together. So that's another thing I look to. Sanford and Benedict, for instance, I believe they irrigated once in the entire growing season of 2019, which is fairly uncommon in California and really contributes to the quality of that wine.
You've started making a little bit of Syrah. In 19, is it a vintage where we should be looking at the Syrah, the Pinot, the Chardonnay, any specific vineyards you'd highlight as being particular favorites of yours?
You know, I'm going to be 100% honest. I do believe that each vintage, and I'm only laughing to myself because we have two critics that always ask me this question, and I never quite know how to answer them. I do believe that every vintage is kind of Pinot or Chardonnay dominated. But my problem is with my palate and the way I look at these wines, sometimes it takes me 10 years to figure out which is which. So I would say at the moment they're even. I started doing a tiny bit of Syrah. I believe we did 5 barrels of Syrah. So it's in extremely small quantities. A lot of people know me from working with Gim at Bon Climat, but during that time period, I was also working at Coupé making Syrah because they shared the winery. So Syrah is a love of mine. And I hope we'll be able to continue doing tiny amounts of Syrah in the future. In terms of, I don't believe there's a slouch within the lineup of wines. Some of my, I hate to even say favorites, because if we did a tasting once a week for the next 5 weeks, I would have a different favorite at each tasting. But one of the reasons I love 2019 and keep comparing it to 2010 is it really is a educational vintage where if I wanted to show someone what my 20 years of experience at Los Alamos tasted like and what Los Alamos means to me, I would choose the Los Alamos. If I wanted to show Biennacido, I'd choose Biennacido. So it's a very transparent vintage in terms of terroir, which suits my palate and our goals here at the winery perfectly. So it's I would say to taste the complete lineup from the first Chardonnay to the last Syrah, to the only Syrah, and all the Pinots in the middle, is a great kind of story of what we're trying to do here. So I don't want to say favorites because just in my head I already thought of 3 or 4. So I'm going to lead you astray if I claim that one of the children's is the favorite.
Gavin, sadly, couldn't be out there this year with COVID, but look forward to you returning to London and trips to California. Thank you very much for finding the time this evening for everyone, given you're about to kick off on the 21 vintage and it's a hugely busy time of year for you. Thank you enormously, and look forward to the wines arriving in the UK.
Thank you. Thanks for the time, and thanks for sharing our wines with everyone in Europe. Much appreciated.